Welcome back, Lorcana players. It's Poisonous. This video is a throwback to an old list that I've ran before, but there comes a time in every meta where blue gets really greedy, and sometimes you just need to build a list that can punish the Sapphire ramp deck. So this is a Purple Steel Locations aggro list, very similar to one that I ran in the past. In set 5, red-blue is very dominant, and with their access to different board wipes like Sisu and Be Paired, we turn to locations then as a way to beat them, and I think that there's space in this meta for an aggro deck that can do the same thing. So some important cards have rotated, but the Whispers in the Well cards have added a few new locations, which gives this deck a little bit more viability, and we have some new aggro cards like Nala to make it work. So I've been testing this deck out online, and it is really good at punishing blue decks, and I brought it to my locals this week, and I went 3-0, and I've done some testing with some players, and I think that the deck maybe is not a tier 1 deck, but if you're in a meta where you have a ton of blue players, this is a deck you could definitely bring to throw in some upsets against unsuspecting opponents. As always, thanks for checking out the video. If you aren't subscribed yet, go ahead, exert that subscribe button, and let's go on a quest together. So now let's dive into the deck list. So in the deck list, we have 4 copies of Captain Hook. He's very good at protecting your locations. He trades up a lot of times, and opponent is unlikely to challenge with little dinky characters if you have him down to take them out. Like a 1-cost Clarabelle might want to attack a location, but if you have Captain Hook, she's not going to do that. We have 3 copies of Calhoun for very much the same reason. Good card for protecting your locations because they don't want to get eaten by Calhoun. We have Doc for card draw. 3 copies of Nala. Nala being able to quest for 3 and having resist is extremely powerful against blue decks when they're ramping in the early game and not really playing anything. You drop down a Nala and quest it a couple of times, then you're already a significant way to 20 lore, and you can easily clean up the game after that just by continuing to apply pressure. We have 3 copies of Giant Cobra as another instant lore gain. We're running Genie Satisfied Dragon in this deck only because of the synergy with Dumbo and the Genie shift, but otherwise I would say you could also just run Lexington, who's a little bit stronger, but doesn't have the evasive, has alert instead. John Silver, Greedy Treasure Seeker. He's kind of a staple in location decks because of how strong and how much he quests for. 3 copies of John Silver, Ship's Cook. 4 copies of Dumbo. Dumbo's in here as kind of a mid-range card draw option. If you don't have Dumbos, because they're not as expensive now, but they were still pretty hard to get. If you don't have Dumbos, then I would say you could easily just swap in some other cards that do card draw if you have Yzma, or if you wanted to just put in like Diablos or the Elsa that replaces herself, or Cusco. If you just want card draw options, I just think that the Dumbo is a good threat and is often removal bait, and it's just a way to get you some extra resources later in the game if you're in a kind of a grindier match. 4 copies of Genie, Wish Fulfilled. Great 2-quester, replaces itself by drawing a card, so always good value. 2 copies of Hades. He's in here as a targeted removal or card draw, so he's pretty good value either way, and we're only running 2 copies because in a lot of games it's over before you get to him, so don't necessarily need him, but there are matchups where he does come in handy. We're running 2 copies of Genie, Wonderful Trickster. I think that this card is kind of a funny tech card that I've been using, but it's actually not as silly as you would think. I just kind of love the card design, and it works well with this deck, so we'll talk about that more in the breakdown. 3 copies of Fire the Cannons as a way to ping down opposing characters or get good tempo in the early game. And then our location package has Fairy Ship, Zootopia, Castle Wyvern. So those were all added with Whispers in the Well. And then we have 7 Dwarves Mine and 2 copies of the Library. So that's the deck list. Let's break down some of the opening and tech options for the deck. On play, our ideal opening is very much an aggro opening. So we want to have our turn 1 location, ideally Zootopia because it has an upside and Fairy Ship doesn't, but either one is fine. If you don't have a location, then putting down Captain Hook is also good because he can quest. Turn 2, I find that Nala is probably the most powerful play if you're going to be aggroing out. She quests for 3, and you can usually get 2 to 3 quests in before they find some way to deal with her. Then turn 3, we set up the John Silver. We only have 1 location on the turn that we play him, but we want to follow that up on turn 4 by slamming down 2 locations, preferably 2-cost ones because they have a little bit more health or a little bit more upside. But if you have a Fairy Ship and a Wyvern, or Fairy Ship and a 7 Dwarves Mine, that's also fine. We just want to juice up the John Silver as much as possible in the opening, So then when he's finally able to quest on turn 4, he's questing for 4 lore and he has resist 3, so he's going to be extremely difficult to get rid of without like hard removal. So then they're forced to decide if they want to go after locations or if they want to go after John. And by this point, the game is pretty much over, especially if you're going up against like a blue deck and they go turn 1, develop, turn 2, sail, turn 3, Cinderella. The game is pretty much over at that point if you can run this opening through those lines. On the draw, our strategy changes a little bit. Kind of depends on the matchup. I will say this, if you're going up against like blue-green or blue-steel, I would say that on the draw, you still basically play it like you did on the play, where you want to be aggro. They might put down like a 1-cost character that you want to kill with cannons or something, but in general, you want to be aggro against blue, even on the draw. But this opening draw line is more for other decks where they're not doing nothing for the opening. So against like your purple steel or other mid-rangey type decks like green steel or anything that's not just being super passive in the opening, then we need to play our deck more like a mid-range deck and not just like aggro spam locations. So I suggest like a turn 1 Captain Hook. If they played a character, then turn 1 fire the cannons on that character might also be okay. But I'd rather establish a character and then turn 2 follow it up with Calhoun, who's very sticky and threatening to your opponent's board, or fire the cannons and a 1-drop location is really great on turn 2. And then turn 3, we want to establish one of our big bodies, which would be Giant Cobra or the Genie. But we want to play the game like a mid-range deck and not put down locations. In general, I would say that if you're going up against anything other than blue, you need to lean into the character side of the deck, which is a little bit tricky because we do have 18 locations, so it can be hard to do that. But you're going to lose the game if all you do is play locations and they build a board. Lexington, being a 4/4, is extremely strong against our deck. So you need ways to combat cards like that and not just put down locations and let them slowly beat down all your stuff. Since this is a location deck, let's break down our location package a bit and look at the cards that we are using. We want to run basically the cheapest and hardest to remove locations that we can. A lot of the good locations like Forbidden Mountain have rotated out, but we did get some new locations with Whispers in the Well, and I think that there's a couple all-stars here. Zootopia is a 1/4 for 1 that gains 1 lore, but it has the upside that says new information. Once during your turn, whenever you move a character here, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. This is extremely useful because our deck has quite a few on inkables, and also when you're like double dock and you want to be able to play a dock, really nice that you can just pay 1 lore to move somebody here and cycle a card through your hand, try and get another inkable and then play your dock. But just a really strong location. Fairy Ship was already good in the previous location build, and this is just Fairy Ship with an upside. So we do have Fairy Ship in this deck as well. We want to have those 8 1-drop locations. We have Castle Wyvern, Above the Clouds. This is a 1/5. Characters gain Challenger +1 and resist 1 while here. Well, that's a really strong effect. Makes it so cards like Captain Hook can take out a Lexington. It gives your Calhoun resist 2. It gives your John Silver an extra resist on top of all the resists that it already has. This location has really strong upside. Only has 5 health, which is like kind of mid, but the upside is really good, and having only 1 move cost is really strong. This is a great new location addition to the deck, and I think that when it's down, opponents, if they're not paying attention, can leave something exerted and not realize that you can just spend an ink and move somebody here and actually mess up their plans. We have 7 Dwarves Mine, the 2-cost, move 2, 6. So this one's been around since set 5. So this was in my OG location domination deck as well. But it has a good upside. During your turn, the first time you move a character here, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. If the moved character is a knight, deal 2 instead. The only knight that we're running is Doc, but Doc's a really good card that we want to play, and getting that 2 ping damage can really change the math on things. The move cost is a bit expensive, but it gives you some utility, and otherwise it's just a 6 health location that gains the lore, which is really strong. And then we have the library, which is a 3-cost, so we're only running a couple copies of it. But it gives you card draw for each character that's banished at the location, which is very good, and it has 8 health, so it's very difficult for your opponent to remove. We have John Silver, our greedy treasure seeker. So he's mentioned here because he has synergy with the locations. He gains +1 resist and +1 lore. So if you have 2 locations, he quests for 3, You have 5 locations, then he quests for 6. So extremely powerful. He's kind of broken if your opponent doesn't have a way to get rid of him right away and you have a lot of locations. He just basically wins the game. Otherwise, he's like a 3/3 beater that you can just have available. The good thing is you can play him and not have locations, but then drop them after when he's able to quest, and then you get all the value. For our card draw package, our main tool is Dock. Dock is really great. You can dump your hand and then play him to gain 2 more cards. We have Genie, Wish Fulfilled. Evasive, quest for 2, draws a card, really great overall, and synergizes with our Shift Genie, and just a really annoying card, especially on the play. It's really great tempo. They have to find a way to deal with him, or he also kind of runs away with the game. We have the Library as a location to gain card draw, and we're also running Dumbo, which isn't like a strict requirement for the deck, but if you have Dumbos, put them in there. They're good for removal. Your opponent's gonna waste the removal trying to get rid of Dumbo, and he also can get you a lot of cards and gains you lore at the same time. So as far as an aggro strategy goes, being able to gain the lore and draw the card is just really good. And we have the Wish Fulfilled Genie, we have the Dumbo, and we have the Genie Satisfied Dragon as ways to also get value off of the Dumbo. So 3 important tech cards in this deck. First one is the Greedy Treasure Seeker, which we've talked about enough, so I won't harp on that anymore. But John Silvership's Cook is really good at shutting down challenges. When you play him, you can give a character can't challenge, which is really good against ramp decks because they usually spend the first 3 turns doing nothing, and then the 4th turn they drop down a big character. And if that character can't challenge for a turn, that usually gives you a big enough window to just finish the game off. And then we have Genie, Wonderful Trickster. I have him in here, although he's a bit of a meme card. I think that he actually works pretty good in this deck for 2 reasons. One is that he gives you a combo and a big body shift that can quest for 2. But the other is that he gets a lot of value. Because whenever you play a card, you draw a card, and a lot of our deck is very low cost. So about half of our deck is 1 or 2 cost, and about 2/3 of our deck is 3 cost or less. So that means that you can spam the board. If he doesn't die the turn that you play him, you can, the following turn, if you have a lot of ink, you can play a lot of cards. You draw like a 1 cost location, 1 cost location, 2 cost location, fire the cannons, a 2 cost character, and then you ink to end your turn. You can really go wide, and most decks don't have a way to deal with that. Whether you're going wide with locations or you're going wide with characters, it's going to be very tough for your opponent to come back once he's down and set up. So he's kind of fun. If you don't have him, I would say that you could easily just, run some other low end cards that get good value. But I think that he's kind of fun. He's good. A 4/7 that quests for 2 is also pretty tough to deal with. So I really like him in this deck, and I think that he's a fun tech card. So game 1, we're on the play. We ink a Great Illuminary and play the Fairy Ship. I've since taken the Great Illuminary out of the deck and just replaced it with a library. I was testing it out. But we have the 1-drop location, which is really good. Our opponent inks a Headless Horseman to play a Mulan, which allows them to draw and discard, cycling a card. Importantly, though, it's letting them develop a character here, which could start pipping away at our Fairy Ship. They discard Tipo. And now it's our turn, so we do gain a lore here for the Fairy Ship. We pay 1 for another Fairy Ship, and we pay 1 for Fire the Cannons, protecting our locations from the Mulan. Really great tempo for us. Our opponent inks Goliath, and they play Sail. They ink a Jasmine, and they don't play any characters, so we gain our 2 lore for the Fairy Ships. And now we have a wide open board. This is pretty ideal stuff for our aggro deck. For 2, we play Castle Wyvern and pass. We don't have anything else that we can play. We gain 3 and go up to 6. Play a Giant Cobra for 3. We discard a 7 Dwarves Mine, bringing us up to 8. So we're already a significant way towards winning, and our opponent so far has only developed a Cinderella, which is pretty weak in this situation. They are going on to 6 ink, so they can play something bigger here. So they ink a Vincenzo to play Goliath. The Goliath is got 6 strength, so he can take out any location, and he has a good sized body. So we gain our 3 lore for our locations. We pay 1 for a location, and then we play Dock. So our hand is empty. We draw 2 cards here. Having the Goliath down means that we're going to get back up to 2 cards anyway, so we're going to try and spend as much as possible. We pay 1 ink to move Giant Cobra to Castle Wyvern, which gives the Challenger 1 and Resist 1. So we're at 12. And our opponent here can take out one character or one location. They do choose to take out the Castle Wyvern, reducing the power of our Cobra to trade with their Goliath. And they do chip a little bit of damage onto a fairy ship, but it feels kind of inconsequential at this point of the game. They did play a Cindy this turn, which allows them to get 2 Cinderella triggers, inking twice and drawing twice, and then they draw back up to 2 with their Goliath. We go up to 15 off of our 3 fairy ships, and now we play down 2 Nalas with our 4 ink, which is very good. And then instead of taking out the Goliath here, we're just going to quest. Sitting at 17, each Nala represents game, the locations represent game, so pretty much there's not going to be any way for them to deal with everything on our board and take this game away. You can see on the play, this deck is extremely quick, and against blue decks where they're not really doing anything in their opening, the game can just kind of run away from them. I feel like there's nothing that our opponent did incorrectly here. It's just the nature of the matchup being very bad for them. So they do play a Headless Horseman. It lets you, both players draw 3 cards, and then 3 cards are discarded randomly from each hand. And based on that, each action that's discarded, the player that played the Horseman gets to do 2 damage to an opposing character. In this case, no actions were discarded. That's it for game 1. We'll scoop it up and move on to game 2. Game 2, the blue steel player is going to be on the play. So they ink for turn 1 and don't play a character. So we ink 7 Dwarves Mine and pass. So I'm fortunate here that we don't have a turn 1 play. I did have a turn 1 or a 1 ink card, Fire the Cannons, but since they didn't play a character, I wasn't able to play it. On turn 2, they play Tipo and ink. And now we're able to play some stuff. So we did draw Zootopia a turn too late. So we play Zootopia and then we fire the cannons to get rid of Tipo. Would have been nice to have that Zootopia down already because the Tipo wouldn't really be much of a threat to it. Our opponent plays Sail. So they're just ramping again. Our board isn't really developed, so it makes sense for them to just keep ramping and get to their big stuff as quickly as possible so they can start threatening our locations. They ink Kita. They do 2 for 1 jump ahead, inking another card. And since they played Sail, they're also able to ink another card from hand, going up to 6. Now we gain our 1 lore. But they're going to be able to start dropping 7 bombs like Vincenzo. They can play Goliath. There's lots of really good cards that they can play now that they've ramped like this. So we pay 3 for Giant Cobra, discarding a card to gain 2 lore. We're at a total of 3, but they're going to be able to start dealing with our stuff really quickly now. They pay 6 for Goliath, and then they draw back up to 2 cards. The Goliath is good here because my hand is still pretty big, so unless I can play a lot of stuff this turn, I'm going to end up having to potentially discard a card. Instead of playing small stuff here, I do choose to ink and play Genie. The Genie is just because he's evasive, so he's a bit protected from the Goliath, but I did have to discard 1 to go back down to 2 cards. For 6, our opponent plays Tinkerbell, doing 1 damage to each of our characters, and then they take out the location using Goliath. On our turn, we play a 7 Dwarves Mine. We pay 2 to move the Cobra to the mine, doing 1 damage to Goliath, and then the Cobra trades with the Goliath to get it off the board. We ink Dumbo, and then we quest for 2 with Genie, which brings us to 7. We got rid of 1 big threat. The mine can't be taken out by Tinkerbell in 1 turn, and our Genie is protected by being evasive. But unfortunately, our opponent does have Vincenzo, and our 1 damage Genie perfectly dies to the 3 damage that Vincenzo does on play. And then our opponent starts chipping away at our 7 Dwarves Mine. Start of our turn, we go up to 8, but our opponent has a much nicer board than us. We do play another Genie to draw a card and set up another evasive. We ink, and then we play a Nala, just trying to create some threats on the board, get our lore totals up a little bit. Our only hope's going to be to try and race out, because we're not going to be able to deal with the big characters that they're building on board. But if they get too much more removal, we're going to lose anyway. Tinkerbell finishes off the mine. Sing Beyond the Horizon with Vincenzo. Our opponent had 0 cards, now they're back up to having 2 cards, and we're still stuck here. So this game is starting to feel like it's going to become quickly out of reach. We play a Fire the Cannons to do 2 damage to Goliath, and then we pass. So now we do get a little bit of a hand refill from Goliath, but it's way too late. We're at 13, but it's unlikely that we're going to gain anything else for the rest of this game. The Ink Runner gives a character alert, so now they're able to challenge into Genie if they need to, so Tinkerbell could be buffed and challenge here, but they just play Hades, sending the Genie to the Inkwell, and then Tinkerbell is able to take out Nala, and they quest for 5. We draw a Genie, play him, draw a card, and then play Castle Wyvern. Not going to do very much here because the Tinkerbell and the Goliath are able to clear our locations pretty easily, but we're just going to spend everything that's in our hands so we can get 2 cards, although it feels like this game is pretty well over. Our opponent pays 8 to play Headless Horseman, so we do the draw 3, discard 3. So there's 1 action. Our opponent has a Beyond the Horizon, so that puts 2 damage onto our Genie. Hades hurls a Thunderbolt at Genie, clearing him off the board. Our opponent's not taking any chances on letting us get back in this game. With the Genie gone, they are now able to clear off the rest of our locations. Using a couple calculated challenges, they clear them off efficiently. And then they quest for 3 with Vincenzo, bringing them up to 8, but now they're showing 11 lore on board, so I just scoop it up. They're gonna remove anything that we play next turn. We're not gonna be able to threaten lethal, and they'll be able to threaten lethal the following turn before us. So game 3, we start off by inking and then playing a fairy ship, so an ideal start, and our opponent inks and does nothing. We pay 2 for Castle Wyvern, we gain our lore for our fairy ship. We're starting off with a couple locations pretty quick. Our opponent has to ramp and start to respond here, or it's going to get away from us. So 2 for Tipo, they ink a card, and the Tipo is not much of a threat to our locations. We gain 2 for the start of our turn, and for our play this turn, we're going to set up our John Silver. We already have 2 locations in play, so he has resist 2 and quest for 3 currently. Our opponent has the Cinderella, which lets them ink a card going up to 5 ink at the end of the turn, and they do 1 chip damage onto the fairy ship. So here we play 2 for Nala, 1 for another fairy ship, and now our John Silver quests for 4. So we go all the way up to 9. Is very fast. Our opponent has a tiny board, and we're pretty much halfway to victory with a really wide and difficult board to deal with. Both characters challenge and finish off the fairy ship. Our opponent plays 5 for Namari, lets them draw and discard, and she gets +1 strength for each card in the discard. Unfortunately, right now they only have 1 card there, so she's still quite weak. Notably though, she is a princess, which means that at the end of the turn, they get a Cinderella trigger. They can ink a card in their hand to draw a new card. Now for the start of our turn, we go up to 11. We pay 2 for Dock and discard 2 Genies. My entire hand was on inkable, so I couldn't actually play a Genie here. I didn't want to take a turn off, so I choose just to play the Dock and chuck the Genies to get 2 new cards. We're really close to being able to just get to the finish line anyway, so we want to keep on the gas. Nala to Castle Wyvern, and then we ink and move John Silver to Castle Wyvern. So now he's got resist 3 again, he quests for 3, Nala quests for 3. So we're already at 17, and we have 2 3-questers, 2 locations, and an unexerted character for our opponent to contend with. Our opponent has to use all of their characters to take out the Castle Wyvern. They can play Hades to remove Nala, but it's still too late. We have too much, and then we do show the giant cobra we have in hand. So even if they had left 1 lore on the board, we'd go up to 18 and then giant cobra to go to 20. You can see how potent this deck is, especially on the play against Sapphire deck. On the draw, it's a little harder against blue steel because they have a lot of big characters, but against green blue, I find that even on the draw, the deck is extremely strong. So I think that if you're looking for something to beat green blue and blue steel, this deck is definitely a choice that you can make. It does have a rough matchup into purple steel mid-range because they have a lot of characters to deal with the locations, but it's not unwinnable. It's just a really unfavored matchup. So that's the deck. I think that there is space in the meta to fit in an aggro deck like this. You just have to reimagine it a little bit because of the spooky sight and the Prince Philip combo. Character aggro isn't maybe as good as it was, but location aggro does seem quite strong. So that's the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. What decks have you been playing? Have you toyed around with any aggro decks? And what do you think of the meta as it is now? Thanks for watching the video. Cheers.